Outputting our coverage. It's what we do.
That's all we do every Thursday
At 5:30.
College football.
Mountain West Conference.
Doesn't matter.
SEC
Is all that matters.
Nick Saban
Is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's all. Let's start the show.
Good evening, possibly ladies and most certainly gentlemen, to the Outputting Our Coverage show. David, it is championship week, sort of. I guess not technically till Sunday, since they decided to play the game on a Monday.
I don't know,
but
7 days.
It still
Within
counts.
7 days. That's
still
right.
counts. Lots of exciting stuff. We're going to give you the best preview of the Alabama-Notre Dame National Championship that you can find on internet radio at Spreaker.com anywhere.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
For sure, it's going to be the best one. Probably better than anything you can watch on TV.
And in debate format, so there will be arguments.
Yes. You will have to stick around to see the exciting way we'll be breaking this one down for you. Speaking of breaking down, normally we do good calls and bad calls to open up this radio program. We didn't do that the past couple of weeks. I wanted to see how the bowl season played out. Turns out, bowl season playing out much like our regular season predictions.
It was, for some people, much worse. For some people, surprisingly much better.
Yes. But for
Auburn
people,
Josh did pretty well.
Yes, he's doing quite well. For people that are hosts of this radio show, pretty terrible.
I was trying to avoid that, but yeah, I think I'm in 8th right now. You're in 14th at 500.
Let's roll through some good calls and bad calls. It's sort of the greatest hits of the bowl season, if you will.
All right, I'm gonna keep my good calls for last. Some of my bad calls, I don't even know if I can rank these as bad calls because it was just bad teams showing up on a given day. Southern Methodist just absolutely running over Fresno State 43-10. Did not see that one coming. The Chippewas of Central Michigan beating Western Kentucky, that was pretty bad. Baylor just destroying UCLA. That one hurt me pretty good. But I think my worst one, and I'm going to let you do your bad calls at this point. My worst bad call was probably going with my gut instead of my mind and picking Navy over Arizona State. That was a 62-28 bad call.
That was a bad one. Also, I don't know why I started believing in West Virginia again.
Right.
They pretty much tanked at the end of their season. I guess it's because they were playing Syracuse, but Syracuse putting the whooping on them.
It was also snowing pretty hard in this weird weather. They couldn't go downfield at all.
The weird thing about that one was, initially I kind of thought Syracuse, big advantage in the snow. And then somebody pointed out to me,
they play in a dome.
Right. So now I realized, West Virginia, they're back in this thing. No, that was all in my head. Didn't actually factor
What
into
was
the game,
weird about West Virginia is there were a lot of pass interference penalties being called both ways. They didn't try to go downfield at all during that game, and they had the advantage in speed on the edge. Didn't even try to stretch the field. So
yeah, just maddening. West Virginia, a team that we kind of predicted might have won the Big 12 this year. Oops.
Yeah, I think I predicted that at the beginning. So
oops.
That was not
happens.
good.
Let's see other bad calls. I went with Oregon State. That was a mistake. Texas managed to get just enough to beat them.
They kind of gave that game away there at the end.
I should have gone with Michigan State. For once in the season, I did not pick them after the love affair I'd had with their defense.
A 1-point win, that's not too bad.
Yeah, not that great. The big bad one is really USC. I mean, what were we thinking?
They're playing Georgia Tech is what we're thinking.
I guess, but without Matt Barkley, maybe we should have known. I don't know. I mean, USC just got drubbed in that one.
They did.
What a fall from preseason number 1 to losing the Sun Bowl.
We predicted at the beginning of the season that USC was not as good as a lot of people were talking about, but we did not think they were this bad.
No. That's just crazy.
I think the worst one to me, though, because this one was in the bag. They had the game. They gave it up at the last second, and we should have known it was coming because they do it all the time. LSU losing to Clemson.
Yeah.
The Mad Hatter at it again with bad clock management at the end of the game.
Just terrible. We'll talk some more about these SEC bowl games in a minute. There's got to be some good calls, though, that we had.
There were some good calls. We both picked Utah State and called them coming out of the gates. They handled Toledo really well. I picked San Jose State. I took offense over defense in that game. Ended up getting me a victory. I picked Cincinnati, even though it looked pretty shaky early with Duke. That one was on the fence. And then, of course, I went SEC with a couple of them, but I think my Northwestern pick was pretty good.
That's solid. That's a very solid pick. I don't think a lot of people went that direction. I feel pretty good about my Arizona State over Navy. Other than that, no, I don't really have much to be proud of at this point. So I can't pull any shockers out of my hat or anything.
Louisiana Lafayette, a lot of people didn't know about that.
Yeah, we'll take it. We'll take it, I guess. Lots been happening on the bowl scene over the past couple days. But I'd like to talk about specifically SEC's performance in bowls so far. Impressed?
No, I'm actually disappointed. Pretty across the board disappointed. We'll start with Mississippi State. Probably should have handled Northwestern, a Northwestern team who has had a good season but has been pretty underwhelming. And you thought maybe this is a time for Mississippi State, who faded towards the end of the year, could end on a positive note going into next year. They really kind of tanked it. South Carolina struggled with a Michigan team who we all thought they were going to handle pretty easily. Georgia struggled with Nebraska. It all kind of culminated with Florida last night.
What a disgrace.
Absolutely looking like they were in another world. Louisville looked like they might be the best team to this point who has used the 3 weeks or the time off to prepare for a game. They looked ready last night.
Well, you've been a big Louisville fan all season, talking up Teddy Bridgewater. I think you got what you were looking for.
I did. He is absolutely outstanding, probably a Heisman front runner for next year, and I think probably one of the best quarterbacks in the next two drafts that we're looking at.
So if you're a Tennessee fan right now, how upset are you after you watched that game last night?
You
could have had that coach.
You have to be absolutely upset. I think if you're an Auburn fan, I think Charlie Strong was the best option for 2 or 3, maybe even 4 SEC schools. He knows the conference, he can recruit, and he showed last night he is a heck of a coach.
All right, so let me take it a step further here for you.
All right.
Preseason pollsters have a habit of kind of over-exaggerating the importance of bowl games.
Most definitely.
Where would you slot Louisville going into next year? Does this mean something? Are they on the rise or not really?
I don't think so. I think they were in a higher position than where they were ranked early this year. They were in the top 25, but I think they were 24th to start the year. I can see them being maybe a 15. They really need a number one running back. If they get their guy back from injury, I think they have that. Their defense really needs to kind of tighten up in a couple areas, but I think they're on the right path. Charlie Strong's a defensive coach. He's going to make sure the defense is coached up. They've got a definite quarterback with Bridgewater. They're just not going to sneak up on a lot of people next year, but I can see them at a 15. I don't think they should break the top 10.
And of course, we would be remiss if we did not mention the hit.
Oh, my goodness.
It's all over the internet at this point. Jadeveon Clowney taking matters into his own hands.
A man amongst boys. Do you want to set this one up?
All right. So, completely inept referees in the South Carolina-Michigan game. I believe they're from the Big East.
They were bad all the way through.
Just terrible. And it come to a point in the game, Michigan trying to rush on a 4th down to get a first down, very critical point in the game. They come up what looks to be, to pretty much every observer, about 4 or 5 inches short.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty clear to the naked eye, just right there on the camera, you can tell. The referee is standing right there, sees the exact same thing that Joe Schmo sees at home, extends his little arm and says, "First down, Michigan."
You know who did see that it was short? Steve Spurrier definitely
saw that. I got that just from his facial expressions and his nonverbal communication. Yes. I think he knew.
If you have not seen that, please go and YouTube that. You need to see Steve Spurrier's reaction to that first down call. He jumped all over the referee.
So not only did that happen, they reviewed it. It stood for some reason,
right, I'm
which
not
is
sure
just
how that
a
happened.
complete disaster. And the very next play, Jadeveon Clowney says, "Guys, I got this.
Right.
Don't worry.
Defense, do not worry. I will take matters into my own hands."
Just breaks through the line. I'm not sure if he was touched or not. I'm pretty sure on that play, it was kind of like on NCAA football where the guys start pulsating and just whoever touches them just flies off of them. Just ran through, trucks the Michigan running back, helmet flies off, and then possibly the best part, he just palms the ball, left hand, just picks it right up.
Right, everybody's diving for the ball, and he's almost looking at his teammates as if he's saying, "Hey guys, I told you, I've got this. Don't worry about it."
Come on, guys.
And he just picks it up with his left hand, scurries another couple yards, and then celebrates for the next 40 seconds, which he deserved.
Yeah. So I mean, the game wasn't totally over at that point, but pretty much. Momentum-wise, it was over at that point. I knew South Carolina was going to win. Just an amazing display. I think with that one hit, Clowney automatically gets himself a trip to New York next year for the Heisman. Possibly even inserts himself as the top candidate for next year.
I don't know. It's tough on defense to win that. Let me ask you this, though. Do you think we'll have a better hit in 2013?
I haven't seen a hit that good in a very long time.
I haven't either.
It's difficult for me to even think of hits that compare to that.
That's going to be a tough one-up.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably find examples of like receivers coming across the middle getting laid out by safeties, but this is way more impressive than that.
Well,
I mean, there's less less speed involved, and it's just a harder hit.
It happened in the span of about a second and a half, and within the span of about 3 or 4 yards.
Yeah,
and he just generated all kinds of inertia.
So if you haven't seen that one yet, definitely worth your time. Also worth your time sticking around through this commercial break. We're going to be breaking down the BCS championship game from sunny Miami, Florida, while we're not actually in Miami, Florida.
And it's not sunny at all.
It's not really that sunny either. But we'll be talking about it on the other side here of outputting our coverage.
It's time for SEC preview. SEC, Big 10, Big 12, 12 can't count. SEC, college football robber barons. SEC, yeah, they're big, they're fast, they're strong. And Missouri and Texas A&M as well. Yeah, SEC preview. Here we go.
All right. Got to recycle the SEC preview intro.
That was pretty nice.
I'm
just glad we have SEC who is defending their national championship crown.
Yeah, the SEC for what is this, the seventh straight year?
Seventh straight year.
Pretty impressive run. As you all know by this point, Alabama will be playing Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, in the national championship on a Monday at what time's the game?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock? Sounds good. All right. Instead of our normal previews, we thought we'd switch it up a little bit today. Kind of try to prevent a two-sided scenario here. One of us will kind of make a case for why Alabama will win or could win, and the other will make a case for Notre Dame. I'm sure it's probably going to be tough for you to guess who's going to make which case here. I mean, just based on knowing things about these people, it's going to be really tough for the listeners out there to guess who might be making the case for whom, right?
Yeah, we just had to flip a coin about it.
Yeah, that's exactly how it went. So,
before we get started, I just want to throw something out there. For any of you who know me, you know this. When asked a direct question, I typically just shout out an answer with such confidence that people just go with it. 7 o'clock is not the game time. It is at 8:30. So any of you...
Are you sure within time zones you may not be...
It's still not at 7. It might be 7:30.
That rounds, as far as I'm concerned.
It is at a random time at night.
On a Monday. I hate the Monday game.
Yeah.
I mean, what's up with that?
I don't
know. I mean, really, all these games after New Year's just so dumb.
All right, well,
so dumb.
Well, Andy, since you're going to be breaking down Notre Dame and you have the more difficult pitch, I think,
okay.
Do you want to go first or second? I'll let you pick.
You should probably let me go second, just because I do have a more difficult pitch.
You do. I'll start it out. I think the first thing I want to talk about is defense. Everybody in the media kind of uses words like vaunted and feared when they talk about the Notre Dame defense, which is weird this year because it's typically the opposite. When they're talking about the Alabama defense, you hear stuff like inexperienced and flawed, especially because I think people are keying in on the last couple games. This defense, don't get me wrong, is nothing like last year's defense, and they're not elite by any means, but this is still a really good defense that I think people are overlooking. In the Georgia game, they did give up 395 total yards and 28 points. Against Texas A&M, they gave up 29 points. They gave up 253 yards in passing and 165 yards rushing, which is very atypical. But what a lot of people aren't talking about is that the next highest total they gave up was 17 to LSU. They played in 11 other games. Alabama only gave up double digits 5 times, and they pitched 4 shutouts. So however you want to look at it, they're still pretty impressive. Their numbers, when you stack them up, Alabama and Notre Dame's defenses, Alabama leads in almost every major category. Notre Dame has the one everybody likes to talk about in yards or points allowed per game, but they only have it by 0.4. It's 10.3 to 10.7. Alabama leads in yards per game, passing yards per game, rushing yards per game. They have scored 7 more defensive touchdowns, 9-2, and they have 1 more interception. And typically when you think about Notre Dame, you see all the Manny Te'o highlights of running around and getting interceptions. I think they're really going to have an advantage with pressure. Golston has been playing a lot better football for Notre Dame. He's been a lot more consistent. He's only thrown 2 picks in the last 6 games. But if you go back and look at the teams that he faced that got pressure on him, like a Michigan with a really good front 4, he threw 2 picks in the game. When he throws picks, he kind of gets panicky. He starts to run first. He doesn't sit in the pocket and throw. I really think this is going to be the key to the game. One way or the other, a lot of people are going to say Alabama establishing the run. I think Golston has the game in his hands. I think Alabama is going to be able to shut down enough of Notre Dame's run that he's going to have to make a play. And what he does under pressure, I think, is going to be really interesting. Everybody's going to point to Notre Dame's rushing attack, and they have been extremely impressive. The one that really impresses me is 274 yards against BYU, who has a really good rushing defense. But the 3 numbers that stand out to me even more than that, 150 against Stanford, 97 against Michigan, and 57 against Purdue. These are 3 defenses who really kind of stack up to Alabama with strong fronts, who kind of controlled this offensive line for Notre Dame, who is a really good offensive line, but they really kind of had their way with this line. I think this is more typical of what they're going to see against Alabama. I don't see him getting more than 150 yards, so I really think the pressure is going to be on the quarterback, and that doesn't bode well for Notre Dame because Alabama, like we said earlier, they have 17 interceptions on the year, and most of those come from quarterback pressures or just making them uncomfortable. So look for the Alabama secondary to be a pretty big key in the game. Offensively, Alabama has been much more balanced than they've been in years past, I think in large part to their new offensive coordinator. I really think that continues. They've got 2,000-yard rushers. Did you know Yeldon got 1,000 yards this year?
I figured he had to be close.
It was 1,000 on the money.
Yeah.
And both backs are averaging over 6 yards per carry. That's just pretty impressive. So you had 16 touchdowns out of Lacey, and you had 11 out of the freshman Yeldon. I don't think that's going to change. I think they're going to have pretty good success. They're going to have to run the ball a lot. But the real key in this is A.J. McCarron. He's performed a lot stronger than people thought he would. Not putting up gaudy numbers. They don't ask him to throw that much, but he's been pretty efficient. He's got 26 touchdowns and only 3 picks. Now, the picks came later in the year where he's not looking as accurate, but when they need him, he's stepped up in some pretty key roles in big games. The big weakness right now for Alabama is going to be wide receivers. They've got Amari Cooper, who's kind of stepped up and become that number 1 receiver they need, but Kenny Bell might not play. There's still reports that he's been to practice to do some warm-ups, but nothing too intensive, so not sure if he's going to do it. So it's going to be up to people like Norwood and Jones and Williams to step up. I'd really actually keep my eye on DeAndrew White and Cyrus Jones. They've really got the speed to kind of test this Notre Dame secondary who, up until this year, the knock's been that they're too slow. They can't keep up with anybody. They haven't really played anybody with elite speed other than maybe an Oklahoma or a USC, but they didn't have Matt Barkley, so they didn't have anybody to throw to. But really interesting to see what Notre Dame's secondary is going to do with the speed. But before I get done, I think it has to be mentioned the strength of this Alabama team is the offensive line. Barrett Jones might be the most impressive person when you actually sit down and look at it that I've seen in quite a while. If they win this national championship, he will have won 3 national championships and been a first-team All-American at 3 different offensive line positions.
That's pretty impressive.
You can walk into any NFL job with that resume. That's going to impress a lot of people. And he might not even be the best person on the line. You've got 4 possible first-round NFL draft picks whenever they come out. Really good all year. They're going to see some pressure. They're going to see a lot of different blitz packages. When you have a month to prepare, you're going to see new stuff. But I think with the experience they have and kind of the bulk and the size and the game plan they have, I don't think this is going to change. I really think the offensive line dictates the tempo, and they're going to kind of get what they need to get. So I think with all that being said, I've got to pick Alabama to win. We'll talk about our picks a little later, but that is my pitch on Alabama.
It's a pretty good pitch. It's hard to argue with many of those points, pretty much all of those points. It's difficult to argue. Real quick before I get into my preview, let's talk injuries real quick. Barrett Jones, good to go?
Everything I'm reading says that he's good to go. He says his ankle feels fine. They're withholding him from practice just to kind of get him as much rest as possible.
So Kenny Bell, questionable at this point?
If I had to put money on it, I'd say he's not playing. But,
Okay.
I mean, he just had surgery a month ago.
Yeah,
but
that's a quick turnaround.
It is. And you don't really want to pressure it with a young guy who has multiple years in his career.
What about Jesse Williams? See any issues with him? He
I don't.
was
I
out
think
in the Georgia game for a little while. I think he's good to go now.
I think he's good to go. Jesse
All right.
Williams will be in.
All right, so a couple injuries to maybe watch out there with Alabama. Notre Dame looking pretty solid on the injury front. They've actually had some pretty good luck as far as injuries go. That's sometimes it's what you need to get into a game like this. The injury ball has got to bounce your way. As David said, I got a little bit tougher task here trying to prove this one. But let's start by looking at the quality of competition. It's said every year, I mean, we say it on this show pretty frequently that the SEC far and above the best conference in the world, if not the universe.
Right.
But, I mean, if we're trying to be objective, this year that may not be so much the case as in other years.
That's a good point.
When you look at traditional SEC teams, Auburn, Tennessee, down probably as low as they've been in quite some time. Georgia was decent. I mean, if you're looking at quality wins for Alabama, you could say Georgia definitely a quality win.
Right.
Maybe LSU you still call a quality win at this point.
Probably.
But other than that, there's really not anything on that schedule that you say, wow, that was a really great win for them. And as we've said, that's not totally Alabama's fault. A lot of the teams that they played in the SEC this year just aren't as good as they usually are. So
and we looked at the Saragin ratings a couple shows back, and Notre Dame had the highest.
Right, so you got to go off of that. If you look at Notre Dame's schedule, if you want to say quality wins, it's kind of the same case with them. I mean, Stanford, a bona fide quality win for them.
Definitely.
Oklahoma, maybe you consider that a quality win, but other than that, a lot of teams that aren't as good as usual. I mean, USC's on that schedule, not as good as they usually are. Michigan's on that schedule, not as good as they usually are. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, I'd say the quality of competition for these teams is a lot closer than a lot of people are thinking out there. So, you got to take that into account. And, of course, a lot of people are talking about Manti Te'o for good reasons. I mean, maybe not so much his statistics. I think his leadership presence on the field is certainly valuable, but it's really more than Manti. I think you have to look at Notre Dame's entire front seven on their defense. They have some solid playmakers there. Stephon Tuitt, 303-pound defensive end, has 12 sacks on the year. Prince Shembo, outside linebacker, adding about 8 sacks. The other side, Capron Lewis Moore, another defensive end, throwing about 6 sacks in there as well. And then kind of unusual for a non-SEC team, but Notre Dame has a pretty big guy in the middle on their defensive line as well, and Lewis Nix, 326-pound nose tackle. So that has to be something that will help them match up a little bit better to Alabama than some of the other teams. Although, if you look at Georgia, they had a lot of those same kind of playmakers, and at times they really struggled to stop the Alabama rushing attack. So something to keep an eye on. As David mentioned, the Alabama offensive line has controlled most games this year. If Notre Dame's front seven can't do anything to stop that, this one's going to be over pretty quickly, I think. But they have the talent. They have not had a chance to prove themselves against an offensive line like Alabama's thus far, so we'll have to see. It's definitely a matchup to look out for. David mentioned the Notre Dame defense leading the country with 10.3 points allowed per game. Another interesting statistic I found, missed tackles. I didn't know people actually kept track of this, but Notre Dame has 55 missed tackles on the year. Alabama has 66 missed tackles. Probably not a statistically significant difference there, but
do you know how many Manti Te'o has?
I'm not sure, no.
During the Heisman race, they talked about it. There have been 3 independent film studies done of Manti Te'o's games. He has missed 2 tackles all year.
That's pretty good.
That is impressive.
That's pretty good. So you see, the reason I want to throw that statistic out there is if you want to beat Alabama, you have to be disciplined on defense. And I think maybe that's a statistic you can look at that kind of points you in that direction. So we'll have to see. Certainly something to look out for there. If we're looking at Notre Dame's offense, you have a relatively inexperienced quarterback in Golson, and while there have been some impressive rushing statistics this year, I think really, as far as playmakers, the running backs are overall pretty average. I mean, Theo Riddick and Sierra Wood, not exactly 5-star game changers. They do well in the system. I think Golson is going to have to be a rushing threat in this game for Notre Dame to be a factor. Really, in all the games that they've had success rushing this year, Golson's had almost as many carries as either one of those running backs.
Right.
So that's going to be something they're going to have to look out for. You mentioned that probably the strategy in this one is going to be Alabama keying on the run. A couple teams have done that late in the year against Notre Dame. Golson's been relatively efficient. Of course, maybe not against the caliber of defense he's going to see here, but certainly not the wide-eyed freshman that he was at the beginning of the year. He's got a little bit more experience going for him now. One thing that worries me, Notre Dame lacks playmakers at wide receiver. I mean, they're kind of in the same situation that Alabama is at this point. Notre Dame has Tyler Eifert and T.J. Jones, neither of which are names you've heard a lot about, probably because they haven't done anything that isn't quite pedestrian this year. I mean, they've been solid enough, but that's not really Notre Dame's game, going out there throwing long bombs, dynamic playmakers at wide receiver. But that's certainly a dimension that would be helpful in a game like this to spread out the Alabama defense. So I'm trying to stay positive here, though.
And that's true, yeah.
I'm trying. It's difficult at times, but what I'd really like to do, though, is let's just take one game that I think might be a good measuring stick. Stanford and Notre Dame. Stanford probably the team most similar to Alabama that Notre Dame has played so far this year. And if you look at that one, a very close game, came right down to a big play at the end. Golson in that game, 12 for 24, not spectacular. One touchdown, no picks though.
That's the big thing. No mistakes.
That's solid against a pretty good defense. Sierra Wood, Theo Riddick, each had 12 carries. Each of them went for about 50 yards. Again, not great. They're probably going to have to do a little bit better than that in this game if they want to stay in it. Golson, however, 15 carries for 41 yards. I think if they can get something around that out of Golson, that'd be pretty successful. Right. I would consider that to be pretty good. Notre Dame's defense got 2 interceptions in that game, neither of which were from Manti Te'o. I think that's definitely something that's got to happen in this one. You saw in the Texas A&M game, turnovers automatically get you in the game with Alabama. That's virtually got to happen. There's got to be some turnovers in this game.
Alabama likes to work on a schedule.
Right.
Anytime you can get them off that schedule.
Right. So if you can do that, and Notre Dame has some playmakers on defense, not least of which Manti Te'o, who could make things like that happen. So there's got to be some turnovers. Notre Dame was 44% on their third downs against Stanford, 7 for 16. I think they got to be a little bit better than that, too, in this game. Only got 334 total yards in that game, 150 rushing and 184 in the air. And the big thing that jumps out to me in this one, we talked about turnovers in favor of Notre Dame, but Notre Dame lost the ball 5 times in that game.
Man.
Well, 5 fumbles, 3 of them lost. And then you tack on to that 9 penalties for 70 yards. You're not going to be able to get away with that.
No, you can't have that.
So, but really what it all came down to in the end, a controversial stop on 4th down of Stephon Taylor, the Stanford running back. I watched a couple replays. Looked to me like he might have been in, but they couldn't find conclusive evidence. But that's the kind of moxie and confidence that Notre Dame's got to have in this game. They're going to line it up. It's going to be big boy against big boy, and they're going to have to do that type of thing in this game. I mean, I could see it coming down to that type of play.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't their last 4th down stop of the goal line stand of the year. They also had to do that against USC late in the game to keep them out of that. So.
That says a lot to me about a defense if they're able to stand up and get that kind of performance. At the end of the day, national championship teams aren't always perfect. They're just good when they have to be.
That's right.
So we'll see. That's the best case I can make for Notre Dame. I think there's some solid points, but
I think so.
I
think the big thing with the Stanford comparison is that Stanford on offense, you can't compare them with the Alabama offense. Stanford has maybe 8 plays on offense that they run. They run dive to the right, dive to the left. They're just going to try to push you out of the way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're solely bent on lining it up and running straight at you, or that Alabama's a little bit more dynamic than that. I think people still have this image in their mind of Alabama just 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and while they could do that sometimes if they need to, I don't think that's their number one game plan anymore.
No, I don't think
They're
so.
trying to air the ball out a little bit, take advantage of A.J. McCarron, those types of things. So that'll certainly be a different dimension for Notre Dame to try to attack there. So with that said, predictions, I really just can't find a lot of super strong evidence to make me think that Notre Dame can win the game. I think they can keep it competitive. I think they can keep it a close game, but in the end, I think overall Alabama has more talent. They're better coached. They've been there before. They know what to expect. In the end, I think it's just a little bit too much. And
what are you thinking on score?
I'm thinking score. I had to go back and cheat and look at my my prediction from Bowles earlier, and I agree with this. I'd say about I might raise it up a little more. I said 35-14 initially in favor of Alabama. Let's go with 35-21, somewhere in that range. I feel pretty comfortable with.
I think Alabama's really going to try to slow down the pace of this game and just kind of grind it. They're going to play ugly football. If you remember the Texas game after the first or second quarter, it was pretty ugly on the Alabama side. I think that's the kind of game that they like. I think they're just going to try to really slow it down, grind it out, play good defense, score when they need to. That being said, I think Notre Dame probably has success maybe hurrying it up early in the game. They'll score some points, but I think Alabama controls the pace and the tempo for the majority of this game. I think it's going to bring the score down a little bit. I'm going to say 24-10 Alabama.
Okay. All right. Well, there you have it. Both of our predictions. Make sure to tune in for that game Monday. Very sadly, the last game of 2012 football season.
I'm going to be saddened by it.
I can't believe it seems like just yesterday we started. Make sure you stick around right here. We're not done yet. We got other stuff coming up on the other side. We'll be right back on Outputting Our Coverage. Outputting Our Coverage. Got some freestyling. Got some positive remarks on our freestyling last week. Thought we'd just make it a fixture of the show, and by that I mean a little bit less we have to prepare for.
That's right. And
so
it kind of puts us back in our normal element.
Yeah, just, it's kind of like wall ball. You just throw it against the wall, it comes back. Sometimes people get hit in the crotch. Those are the good days. So... Do you like that analogy?
I love the analogy. I think it fits perfectly with the show.
All right.
I'm going to ask you this question. What do you think about the state of PA suing the NCAA?
Yeah, I don't know about this. Pretty stupid. If you haven't heard, the Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett is trying to file a federal lawsuit against the NCAA for the sanctions that were levied against Penn State. On what grounds, I'm not sure, because... pretty sure everything that people have mentioned at Penn State was true and actually happened, and they pretty much deserved it. I think what it comes down to is that people in Pennsylvania are upset that their football team's getting hammered, and this is a good way for the governor to try and get reelected.
I agree with that.
But in the end, it's really going to end up hurting the football program much worse long-term than if they had just left this alone, because...
it was almost dead at this point.
Yeah, I mean, people had finally stopped associating Penn State with all of that. Bill O'Brien had a successful year beyond anyone's imagination this year. People were starting to kind of associate Penn State with him and leave all that other stuff behind. But you know the way lawsuits go. The sanctions will probably be done before this case is even heard.
We won't hear about this for another year.
Yeah, so all this is going to do is just keep it in the news. Penn State people will just have to relive it over and over again. The program's never going to escape this if it goes through. Stupid, stupid, stupid idea.
Bad move, Governor.
Stupid idea. Yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about the NFL firing explosion that we had just this week. I mean, they went crazy.
Yeah, like a third of the league's coaches got fired?
7 coaches. It broke a record for coaches being fired in one day. Broke a record for GMs being fired in one day.
The weird thing to me about all of this is NFL coaching is it's very incestuous, if you will.
Right.
They're always firing people, and then another team will hire that coach immediately. I mean, at least in college football, if a guy gets fired, he has to sit out for like a year or two
Right.
before he comes back. you
Well,
know?
it's so weird because all you have to do is get an NFL job once, and then
you're set
You have a
forever.
job for life. Norv Turner, how he keeps getting a job, I will never
Yeah, like
understand.
Norv Turner, Chan Gailey.
Right.
What the crap are people thinking? Like,
Well-
these guys are terrible coaches.
And then people like Chicago fire Lovie Smith, who, by all accounts, has done a great job in Chicago with a really kind of dramatic team and a terrible field. Have you ever seen Soldier Field?
It's terrible.
It's a terrible
Yeah.
field. But they fire Lovie Smith. You know who they were reported talking to? San Francisco's defensive specialist coach.
Yeah, I mean-
is that really going to be a whole lot better than Lovie Smith?
Yeah, I just don't understand it. Andy Reid fired from the Eagles, and pretty much immediately is going to get picked up by another team.
It looks like he's pretty much on the verge of a contract with the Chiefs right now.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of high school, really, with people dating other people,
Right.
and then everyone just seemed to like swap around like in a big circle. It's really kind of what it seems like. To
We
me.
went to a very odd high school.
I don't know if that's most high schools or not, but that was our experience.
It
at
was.
least. We were
It
not
was
involved
true.
in that.
No.
We were the college coaches, if you will, I guess.
Yeah, that
I
makes
don't know
sense.
where this analogy is going, but
Let's get off.
anyways,
Does
yeah.
that count as our offensive comment?
Sure,
Okay.
I'll take it. Chip Kelly, a very hot name as well. Of course, his team plays in a BCS bowl game tonight, but do you think his head's there? Probably not.
Right. It's just reported. The number 2 thing on ESPN right now says Oregon's Kelly to meet with the Bills.
Among like 5 other teams he's
Right.
supposedly meeting with.
so do you think that affects the game tonight?
I don't know. Who did I pick? Let's see. I hope I picked Kansas State in that one. I really did.
I definitely picked Oregon, and I'm
Oh,
not
I picked
moving off
Kansas
of that.
State. Looks like I'm about to pick up a game in this
We'll-
one.
we'll see.
I got a feeling. On that one.
I
so.
think this has the biggest chance of any BCS game of being a blowout. I think if Oregon gets rolling early, it could get ugly.
Yeah, that's true. You're probably right. Getting back to the NFL coaches real quick. I think the head coach makes a big difference in college. Do you think the same is true in the NFL?
No,
is
not
the
at all.
coach the determining factor of team success?
You know what? Let's talk about this for a second, because I've actually been meaning to talk about this, and I keep forgetting it. I think if you look back at NFL teams over the last 15 years and find what makes them successful, the front office is the biggest thing in the NFL.
Yeah.
And it's not what a lot of people think. It's not the big name, because Kansas City tried that. They tried getting the front office personnel or leader from the Patriots. Hadn't worked out for them. There's been a lot of people who try. Jaguars now have the guy from Saudi Arabia. He's supposed to be a big name. Hasn't really done a lot for them. What matters in the NFL, I think, is consistency in the front office. Pittsburgh, for years, was the model of this. They didn't always have a great year, but they stuck with their coach, they stuck with their staff, they stuck with their mentality. The Patriots are a great example of this. They stick with their coaches, they have the same mentality, they bring their people in. Everywhere where you see consistency, the Giants in New York, the San Francisco 49ers, all starting to come around and have this really strong movement, is because they're consistent in their front office, they have good personnel, they stick with the game plan. The Buffalo Bills have not been good and probably won't be good for a while. The Kansas City Chiefs are the same way. The teams that are always looking for a coach and always with the turnaround, I don't think they'll ever have success until they settle down, stick with a system, and get it working.
Yeah. See, this is why I just can't get into the NFL. It just seems like it's just wacky world, you know, like with the coaching and the teams are all trying to do the same thing. But
Seattle is probably the one exception. They are the ones that are out there with the new thing. The college coach running the quirky offense, who has a really underrated defense. Their personnel hiring is completely backwards from everybody in the NFL, but they might be one of the hottest teams going to the playoffs right now.
It'd be interesting to see what Chip Kelly can do, I think.
I think so.
If he really commits to a spread, air quotes, type
Right.
offense in the NFL, I'd probably watch that. It'd be interesting to see how it works.
Okay, let's just do a hypothetical real quick. I'm going to ask you 2 questions after I give you the follow-up here. Let's say Chip Kelly gets hired by the Buffalo Bills.
Okay.
The Buffalo Bills have a pretty good quarterback.
Yep.
Doesn't fit his system.
Yep.
So they get rid of him in a trade that features LaShawn McCoy, high-powered running back from the Eagles,
Okay.
who is looking for other teams right now. He doesn't feel that he's being used properly in Philadelphia. Also, he does not like that Andy Reid got fired. LaShawn McCoy goes to Buffalo, and they pick up Michael Vick off of waivers. Would you watch that football
Yeah.
with Michael Vick?
I would watch
Okay,
that.
now do you think, here's my second question, do you think that would be enough to win? Do you think the Buffalo Bills could win with that combination?
Probably not. I mean, you got to have a defense in
You
the
do.
NFL.
Now,
right?
they've been drafting pretty well. Their defense has gotten better, but it's not where it needs to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably just echoing things I've heard NFL types say, but I'd be concerned about injuries.
That's
on
true,
offense.
yeah.
I mean, if you're running that high-powered thing, you're really dependent on Michael Vick or LaShawn McCoy or those guys. What happens when they go down? I think to make Kelly's offense really work, he's got to have elite-level playmakers. I mean, you can get away with it at Oregon with...
And keep them on the field.
Oregon, they can win with his offense without having the absolute best guys. But I think for it to work in the NFL... it's got to be the perfect guys to fit his
Right.
system. And not only that, they need to be elite guys.
You know who's a guy that I just thought of while we were talking about this, who if I was him, wherever Chip Kelly goes, I would be jumping up and down and screaming for a trade? Dexter McCluster.
Yeah?
Old Ole Miss
Yeah?
running back / wide
Boy, he'd
receiver
be
/
great.
everything.
Great for that.
I think that'd be neat.
Yeah. Other NFL news, Ray Lewis finally retiring.
Hanging up the cleats.
I
Have
mean-
you heard the announcement, the press conference that he held? Have you ever
What
heard Ray Lewis talk?
I just remember when he shot that guy and he was on TV. So
He
that's-
supposedly, allegedly shot that
Yeah.
guy. He never served time for it, I don't think. But every time Ray Lewis gets done talking, I just want to shout, "Amen!"
Yeah.
He is a very inspiring person.
He's going to be a motivational speaker. I think we all know that.
They're already saying that he has a contract in the works to be a TV analyst already. It's a day
man.
after he announced it.
He's a scary guy.
He is a frightening human being.
Yeah, I think for the good of America, what he should do is just travel around to inner city high schools and just talk to kids and be like, I will kill you if you do something bad.
He should
And-
be the nationwide scared straight.
Yes, that's exactly right. Exactly right. All right, I got to mention this real quick. There's an article today on Sports Illustrated about claimed national championships between Notre Dame and Alabama.
Yeah, this comes up a lot.
There's been a lot of talk about it throughout this season because of this game. Alabama and Notre Dame, I think ESPN showed Alabama with 9 national championships and Notre Dame with 8.
It's all subjective.
Alabama claims 14. I mean, does this really matter? I mean,
No,
why does everyone
it
care?
doesn't matter at all. I really don't understand why anybody would claim any more national championships. Just worry about this year. That's what I really appreciate about Saban's approach. I don't think he cares. I don't think he cares about how many national championships he's won, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the good coaches who focus on today, focus on this play, they're very micro-minded. I think they have a lot of success. I think it'd be pertinent. Fans want to argue and they want to compare. That's all we want to do, and it's good for radio. It's good for publicity, I guess. But I think it's overrated. Who cares what you did in the past? What are you going to do today?
Right. Yeah, I mean, just look at Gene Chiswick. Nobody cares how many national
Right.
championships you won in the past. You can still get fired if you are bad today.
Very
So
quickly.
That's how that one goes. Real quick, one other thing I had. I have been pleasantly surprised at the lack of just overzealous promotion of this game. Have you? I mean, I feel like it was going to be beaten into us, just beaten over the head, Notre Dame, Alabama, and it hasn't been nearly as much as I thought.
To be honest with you, I think the promoters know they're going to have an audience.
Yeah.
I don't think they're really worried about it, so I think they're kind of taking a subtle approach. It's been refreshing.
Yeah, I just kudos to ESPN for once,
Yeah.
one
All right,
time.
real
only.
quick before we let you hear our amazing outro song for the extra 30 seconds. Who wins tonight? What do you see this game?
K-State,
doing?
man. Chip Kelly's distracted.
You
I
think
got to stick with it.
Big wins?
No, it'll be like 10 points.
I agree with you. For Kansas State to win, it's got to be close.
Yeah, 10-point win, K-State.
Okay.
It's going to happen.
We'll
All right.
see.
We'll be back next week and recap the BCS Championship, talk about other stuff that we're not sure about yet. Football will be over, but don't worry. It'll still be really interesting. So we'll catch you next week here on Outputting Our Coverage.
Thank you.